Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to completely dismantle those emotional, culturally driven myths about personal finance and replace them with the exact, verifiable math that actually builds wealth. We're constantly fed these generalized rules of thumb that simply don't hold up to arithmetic. So today, we're exposing the silent numbers hiding in plain sight, the ones that literally decide whether you'll spend your entire life accumulating money or if you can finally buy back your time. Let's get right into it.
All right, let's kick things off with a simple everyday scenario. We've got two guys. First up is Marcus. Marcus spends about $90,000 a year. He drives a newer car, takes really nice vacations, and, looks like he's living pretty large. Then we have Derek. Derek spends just $40,000 a year. He's the guy clipping coupons, driving an older, paid-off vehicle, and just being incredibly careful with every single dollar. So comparing the two, who is making the more responsible financial choice? Who's actually doing better here?
Well, the obvious, intuitive answer is completely wrong. See, we tend to judge financial success with our eyes, and our eyes only ever see the spending. But let's look at the actual math. Derek takes home $37,000 after taxes, meaning his super frugal $40,000 lifestyle actually leaves him falling $3,000 behind every single year. And that shortfall? Yeah, it goes straight onto a credit card. Meanwhile, Marcus brings home $117,000 after taxes. Sure, he lives large, but he quietly sets aside $27,000 annually. The spender is winning, and the saver is losing.
Marcus is actually crushing it because he has a 23% savings rate. And this proves a massive, absolute game changer of a point. High spending or even high income does not automatically equal wealth, and clipping coupons definitely doesn't guarantee financial security. It is entirely about the invisible gap between what you keep after taxes and what leaves your account. That gap is literally the only thing that compounds. If your gap is zero or negative, you're sliding backward no matter how little you spend.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, your debt stop line, the emotional trap of paying off everything.
When people try to navigate debt, they almost always treat their debt and their investments as completely separate conversations. But here is the absolutely crucial point. A debt payoff is literally just buying a bond. Seriously, once you grasp this, it changes everything. When you pay off a debt, you're buying a guaranteed, fixed-rate instrument that pays you a return exactly equal to the interest you just stopped paying. Zero market risk. So the question isn't, should I pay off debt or buy stocks? The only mathematically sound question is, which guaranteed bond pays me a higher yield?
And that brings us to what we call the stop line concept. Let's say the open market is currently offering you a safe bond yield of 4.74%. Because paying off debt means you lock up your cash, you lose liquidity, we add a 1% liquidity premium. So your hurdle rate is 5.74%. If we break down the math, you aggressively kill that 22% credit card, and you wipe out the 7% car loan because they sit well above your 5.74% hurdle. But that 3.5% student loan, you hold that forever. Paying off a 3.5% loan when the market guarantees you 4.74% somewhere else is basically just buying a terrible bond.
Which brings us to Section 2, the cash ceiling, how safety becomes a financial drag.
Look, holding an emergency fund is essential, no doubt about it. But holding a massive cash safety net out of pure fear, that's actively making you poorer. To find exactly how much cash you actually need, you can't just guess. You have to calculate your personal cash ceiling. Step 1, strip your spending down to bare-bones survival essentials. Rent, groceries, basic utilities. Multiply that number by 3, 6, or 9 months, depending on how stable your job is. Then, step 2, add any cash you're going to need for near-term financial goals in the next 5 years, like a house down payment or maybe a wedding.
Let's map this out with some real numbers. Say your strictly essential core expenses are $4,500 a month, and you choose a very safe 6-month multiplier. That makes your emergency buffer $27,000. Now, add in a $30,000 house deposit you plan to use in 2 years. Your strict cash ceiling is exactly $57,000, not a single dollar more. That cash is doing its job. But remember, it's a ceiling. Every single dollar you hold above that $57,000 is what we call drag money.
Let's actually look at how this plays out over 30 years if you ignore that ceiling. Imagine you unnecessarily hoard $33,000 above your $57,000 limit. If you leave that excess in a standard checking account, inflation completely destroys it. Even if you optimize it in a top-tier high-yield savings account, it slowly limps to about $40,000 in real buying power. But if you invest that excess drag money at a conservative 5% real return, it yields $140,000. Hoarding that 33 grand just to feel safe is literally costing you $100,000 in lost wealth.
All right, let's head into Section 3, the cost of quitting. Surviving the market's noise.
So the math says you need to invest that excess cash to build wealth. But what happens when a market crash hits and your instincts are just screaming at you to sell? Take Ryan's journey. He decided to invest just $5 a day on pure autopilot for 25 years. No stock picking, no market timing, just relentless consistency. And man, it was painful. By dollar-cost averaging, he bought straight through the 2002 dot-com bubble. By 2008, he put in $14,000 of his own money, only to watch it drop to $12,000. He lost a third of his wealth in just 33 days during the 2020 pandemic, and lost $26,000 in a single year during 2022. But because he never stopped, he automatically bought more shares when prices were cheap. By simply doing nothing, his daily coffee money turned into nearly $250,000.
And here is the craziest part about this, the ultimate paradox of quitting. If Ryan had gotten spooked and quit in year 22, it would have cost him about $7,000. But if he had quit in year 2, when his account was down 19%, and he had absolute, hard evidence that investing wasn't working, it would have cost him a staggering $212,000 in missed compounding. The exact moment quitting is most tempting is the exact moment it is the most expensive.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 4, When to Stop Saving, the Retirement Band.
So, you've maintained your gap, managed your debt correctly, avoided massive cash drag, and survived the terrifying market crashes. The system works, but that brings us to the final and honestly most ignored question in personal finance. When do you actually stop saving? The whole financial industry tells you to save forever. But the math? The math says there is a definitive finish line. Let's look at two extremes here. First, there's Owen. Owen got tired and stopped saving just 15% short of his real target. Because he retired early, he had to draw 9.4% from his portfolio right away. His retirement ended 21 years early, running completely dry at 74. Then you have Vincent. Vincent crossed his exact target at 57, but kept mindlessly saving until 65, because no one ever told him to stop. Vincent literally traded the healthiest years of his life just to fund a massive inheritance for someone else.
To avoid being Owen or Vincent, you need to know your real number. Your retirement isn't some arbitrary rule of thumb multiple of your income. It's a living, breathing calculation of 4 specific inputs: your actual post-work spending, your Social Security start date, a long lifespan estimation planned for 95 plus, and a very conservative real return assumption like 4%. Once you nail down that baseline number, you add a 30% safety buffer to survive bad market decades. And that right there creates your retirement band.
Once your wealth enters that top 30% band, you're done. You are mathematically finished, and your retirement is completely funded. Look, the math is totally indifferent to your feelings of anxiety. So you have to ask yourself a really hard question. Are you going to keep blindly accumulating past the finish line just to fund an estate for someone else? Are you ready to finally use your money for its ultimate purpose? To buy back your time, your freedom, and your life?